Hmm.
He says, help me. I'll try to look when we get going here. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the new media show. And I will prepare you. This will probably be a monumentous long one. And good morning, Rob. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Todd. There's a lot to talk about, that's for sure. So you're exactly right. You know, it's how long-winded we're going to be today is the real question. But we're also going to have a guest too. We're going to have a guy who's been around the radio industry for a long time for Radio Inc., who's the editor of Radio Inc., is going to join us at the 30 minutes past the hour here, and
weigh in on the radio side.
Yes, which seems to be generating some curiosity on the podcasting side about how involved they're going to be in the podcasting space going forward. And I'm really more referring to the commercial radio side.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to get that perspective. He's a journalist on the radio side, and he spent the whole time at Podcast Movement. So I'm sure he's got some interesting observations as he looks at both worlds.
Well, I had it's kind of this morning. I was getting the show ready, and I was reviewing Facebook, and Jeff Hines, one of our team members at Blueberry, he had posted, he's a big MTV history buff, and he posted the first 5 minutes of MTV being on the air, and the first leadoff video that MTV launched with was that video killed the radio star. And do you remember in the early days of podcasting, how it was podcasting will kill the radio star, kind of a pun on the MTV launch? So I think it's appropriate to start out today. I think we'll save the radio stuff for later, but obviously when he comes in. But I guess just initially, we didn't plan like normal, but let's talk about some takeaways from Podcast Movement. What I know there was a lot of back channel chatter, more than normal, and maybe we can save that for just a little bit. But what was your initial takeaway?
Well, I mean, I think from a positive perspective, I mean, it was certainly an exciting event. Certainly is a great cross section of the podcasting space and industry, and felt that more people showing up to Podcast Movement is always a good thing. It just presents more opportunities for us to see where the industry is today and how things are progressing. What the makeup of the community looks like. There's so many factors that go into making an assessment on that event, but the bigger picture is that things are on the upside. Things are growing. Things are seem to be developing in a real positive direction. Now, granted, with that always comes some friction and some challenges and some things that are bubbling up behind the scenes and kind of also right out there in plain view too. So it's an interesting contrast. I know I'm actually in the middle of trying to write an article about kind of my observations of where the podcasting space is today and how we're seeing it in the context of history. And because I think a lot of people in the podcasting space are, especially a lot of the newer people, don't really know of or understand the history of this medium. And like you were alluding to at the beginning of the show, Todd, there's a long running kind of, I guess, a anti-radio kind of culture in this medium. And so that's what we're going to explore a little bit today on the show, and it's going to be interesting. But I thought overall it was a really great event. There was some structural things with the event that we can talk about too, but that were a little bit challenging, I think, for this year's event. But sometimes those things are just not in your control.
Yeah, I look at, I think Mike Dell and I, we talked about this a little bit on Friday, and the mix of, I'm getting the mic jacked up here. The mix of men to women it looked pretty close to being 50-50.
Yeah.
And then the just the diversity of the group too was pretty wide. So I'm pretty compared to the early days when it was a sea of white guys,
Yeah, that's
and
right. Bunch
so
of geeks. What do you mean?
yeah, it truly was. So that to me, and I think that's been that way for the last couple of years, but
Yeah.
I'm real happy with that element for sure. Definitely, just from a feedback standpoint, I know Dan's probably going to be listening to this. Definitely want that third day on the trade show floor, or at least half
Yeah.
a day on the third day. I think I'd vote for that but just
Yeah.
looking at I think they need, this is growing. If they go to 3,000 people, or let's say 3,500 for Orlando next year in August, the just the base session rooms are going to have to get bigger because
Yeah.
I was watching because I kept walking away from the booth and I was looking in the rooms and to a session, at least in the area we were in for the trade show area where I could just go do a quick peek, those rooms were packed wall to wall almost every session.
Yeah.
And I know mine was, and then even upstairs, and when we did the state of the podcast, those rooms were packed wall to wall. There was on Thursday, they maybe not as many on some of the sessions, but overall, it was good. Now, the AC in that building sucked. That's just to be frank, and that's not any fault of Dan and the team. That's just because the venue, there was high humidity there, and they just couldn't keep up with the heat sink of 2,500 people in that building. So I think that'll, one thing about Orlando, they're used to 100-degree, 90% humidity. So I can almost assure you that the AC will not be an issue in Florida.
Yeah, if anything, members of the Spreaker team don't enjoy the AC part. it's like it's unnatural to them because they're not used to having AC back in Europe. So
I don't have.
Yeah,
I don't have it here, but I don't deal with the humidity. I've got a wall unit.
I know exactly.
I don't deal with the humidity. The humidity was the butt kicker.
Yeah, no, it was really really strange to have that much humidity that far north, right? It's really an unusual thing.
Yeah. So I think that I'm just looking too. I don't know how much, and we'll have to find out from our guest when he joins us here in a few minutes, what his take was on how many of the radio people cross-pollinated into the other sessions. Now, I was keeping a close eye on badges, and what I did see was a lot of independent podcasters coming around and talking. But boy, I did not 201 see a single radio person stop by the booth. Not a single one, at least talk to us. Yeah. So that to me was like a moment.
Well, I think they kind of stayed up there with their kind of session track and things like that, and we can certainly talk about that part. But I think that was a little bit of a structural thing that I was referring to earlier. Is that that community tends to stay together with themselves because they know each other, and it's it kind of created a little bit of a divide at the event. It was like the broadcasters meet podcasters track, but I think there maybe wasn't a lot of broadcasters meeting podcasters going on. But that's just my take on it. But to be real positive about it, I thought that those sessions were interesting and exciting, and what they were doing was almost like a radio production. They had their own kind of like announcer, and they'd play music between the sessions. And in the podcasting side, it was like complete dead silence between sessions. People would just wander in and out. It's completely different kind of vibe and feel to the radio side of podcast movement. It was almost like a radio production.
So one thing I will say too is that I got wind of and was told of numerous very private events that were held. That were they were exclusive You had to be part of the little group in order to attend dinners and presentations and live podcast. A number of those events happened that were very invite only to a very exclusive club. And that is something that has never happened at podcasts, at least not that I'm aware of at podcast movements before. Everything has been very open and people have, group get-togethers, but that I think the East Coast team, the media companies, really did not participate in. At least saw a few of them maybe around the bar, but they all definitely went off to do their own evening thing with their groups.
But that's very common with that community. They do that at NAB and other events around the country too. So that is just a practice that they do. They kind of like those exclusive kind of clubs or groupings and that they feel safe with, I guess, or and it does create a different culture. And I think that's what's really happening here. Kind of, if you look at the 30,000 foot view, is that there's still a divide between the podcasters, independent podcasters, and the big media or radio side. That they just approach things differently than the independent podcaster has all these years, and it has been. It's a cultural difference. It's a cultural philosophical difference, and that's what I'm hoping to dive into a little bit deeper with Ed here, is just to find out, from a business perspective and from kind of a social perspective, how these two sides kind of differ. And is there ever really, Todd, going to be any overlap here, or are we going to be stuck with this divide between the independents and the larger media companies, or the radio groups? I get a sense that the radio folks are just next year come in and try and just dominate the whole thing, is the impression I'm getting. I'm not sure that that's good or bad or indifferent. I'm not passing judgment. I'm just saying that I think that's the direction, because you kind of saw it a little bit what was happening at the event this year.
Well, I think
it's moving that way.
I think Dan, he even kind of indicated in email that he was under some pressure, and he reassured me, and maybe I shouldn't be even saying this. I apologize, Dan, if I'm speaking out of turn. But Dan said that he understands the independent community. He appreciates the independent community, and this event is going to have a heavy focus on in the independent community. But I know he is under pressure somewhat by his, and I don't know by who. But one thing that we saw this year that we've never. I mean, I look back at the parties that us and Libsyn had in the early years, and we'd spend like $10,000 and have a suite in a bar, and those were the kind of these big blowout parties. We'd have 300 people in a room that could fit 50, and probably should have shut down by the fire marshal and the whole 9 yards. But the cast
some
box,
of them got shut down by the police,
right?
As I recall.
Yeah. So you look at the cast box party they threw at the Reading Street Market was probably the biggest pash that I've ever seen at a podcast movement. What do you think they spent? 150,000?
Yeah, that's a number that I heard thrown around, was about 150,000. Boy, it's
VC.
It's amazing about actually venture capital money.
Man, when you're partying on venture capital, it's that's the way to do it. But they threw on a big party. But in the Castbox team we were talking a lot at the event, and they're a nice group. We talked at length about the issue that they had a month and a half ago or so, or a month ago, and. So they were full court press talking with me and others. But one thing the party was fantastic, and we have to applaud them for that party. But they had a VIP room, and while I understand the concept, the owners and the business and the folks can go in and have a little separate area and it was kind of right off of one of the main dance floors. But to me, again, it was that exclusive club type of thing where some people go in the VIP and something. So if I had any advice to Castbox, no VIP area next year if you do another party. Be inclusive, be completely open. Doesn't look like there's a separate little. And I don't think anybody paid any attention. But for me, it's just those little things that I see that, based on how the community has came up. That's my free consulting advice for the day.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm going to applaud them. I mean, they put together one heck of a party, because you could be up where the music is rocking, and then you could walk to the other side of Reading Street Market and actually have a conversation in a normal tone.
Well, speaking of that topic, Todd, do you want to talk about the music aspect of the events?
If I ever run an event, there'll be a guy playing a guitar at these meetups. Monday, just based upon that many people in that building, the noise level was so high you had to speak high enough as it is. And you get into another room and you get 1,000, 1,500 people and you have loud music. I almost lost my voice in the second day, because I had to, at the evening events, almost yell to talk to someone. Yeah. So it drives me. We've talked about this every year. It drives me crazy that we can't get this right.
I mean, for many years, it wasn't an issue.
Right.
And for some reason, this year it came back.
It was so loud.
I'm still trying to recover my voice.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so loud.
Yeah. I mean, because you go there because you want to network with people and you want to meet people and you want to talk about the medium and all that stuff. And it makes it really hard to do that, especially the next day if you do like 2 or 3 presentations or sessions. I mean, it's risky for you to lose your voice. So you have to choose. Are you going to talk to other people, or are you going to present your session?
True.
And I don't really like making that choice, because that's not why I'm there.
I think Evo says something interesting here in chat. He says, but if we're being genuine, we keep that divide as real as they do, and we have our own divides within podcasting. I don't know. We're all hanging, intermixing. I don't think I think we're all doing a pretty good job of attempting to do that when people are open to discussions. I think there was a lot of commingling per se.
Well, Todd, I think it begs the question. I mean, is this just a temporary thing that we're seeing, where there's this necessity to have this separate track that's podcasters meet broadcasters concept, right? That feels like a transitionary step. That doesn't feel like the ultimate destination of this industry coming together and spending time all together, irregardless of the size of the company or the size of the podcaster, as far as audience or popularity or brand or anything like that. I mean, what's your thought? I think it's just a temporary thing that we're going to see this divide. Eventually, it's all going to blend together, right?
Maybe. I'm still, I'm still not completely positive on the radio folks, and we'll get into that deeper. Yeah. Because a couple of them I talked to, they still don't get it, and it's about
what don't they get, Todd?
Okay. Radio is like this. It's control. It's control.
Well, it's exclusivity.
It's exclusive. It's control. You can't just do anything. And podcasting is open, and so there is a clash there.
Yeah.
Of
culture.
Of culture clash for sure, and there's a certain. And I don't know if I saw any of this displayed or not, but I've seen it at other events. Because again, I didn't interact with very many radio folks. The one guy I did interact with was hammered.
Well,
and I had to laugh because I walked up and I just, I saw this group and I said, "Hey guys," I introduced myself, and "Who are you?" Well, I explained who I am. "How long you been podcasting?" I told him. Wow, and that was a long time ago, and And then the one guy started talking about MTV and Adam Curry. I said, "Yeah, Adam Curry's a friend of mine," and he was, I'm like, "Well, Adam's a friend with a lot of people here. This is his people. Even though he doesn't come to the events, this is, and
Yeah.
So it was an interesting, and I actually did a 10-minute podcast history lesson, right? Podcast Movement needs a podcast history track. I mean, maybe an hour. I do an hour overview every year of the history of podcasting. There needs to be a session for that, because, and maybe that's what I'll submit next year. I'm giving away my track idea. It just, people don't know. They don't know anymore where we've come from, and the hurdles and the battles and the, maybe they don't need to know, but I think the history of this space is becoming more and more important. Here comes our next guest.
Well, that's a good start.
All right, I think your audio is settled down.
Yeah.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to the show.
You guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Good morning,
Guy
Ed.
from Big Bad Radio.
Yeah.
Hey, Ed, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So Ed Ryan from Radio Inc. magazine has been involved in the radio industry for many, many years, and basically covers the radio industry every day. That's his full-time gig, and I would say that the Radio Inc. magazine has really kind of been the leading publication for the radio industry for 30 years now? I don't know. Maybe
26.
I'm wrong.
Yep, 26 years.
46 years. Okay.
26.
26. Okay. Well, that's plenty.
Well, Ed, we were just, we were kind of doing an overview of for Podcast Movement, and I think maybe from what we'd like to do is get your perspective on what you saw and just kind of the high end takeaways, and then we can kind of dig into some of the stuff that you saw on the radio side.
Well, the first thing, Todd, I want to thank you guys for having me on. The second thing I wanted to mention was I wasn't the guy that you saw that was hammered talking about Adam Curry.
No, you were not.
Just to clear that up, that wasn't me.
It wasn't you.
Night.
No.
I have to say, I'm a little taken aback by how it seems like people were frightened by the radio people that were at the show. So the first half hour when you guys were chatting about it, so that I didn't notice that when I was there, but
I don't think
maybe I missed that.
I don't think they were frightened per se. I don't think I had that takeaway. Did you, Rob?
No. It's Ed, I think it's just it's people that they know, right? And I think they just have a different approach to events and how they kind of socially connect with each other. That's different than the culture of podcasting, right? And I think it's just a difference in approach, and yeah. So I was hoping to get kind of your take on what you saw really at the Podcaster Meet broadcasters track, and just kind of get your feeling of what the radio people are thinking about when they come to Podcast Movement, and what do you think? Did you see any differences compared to a typical radio event?
Well, it was nice to see so many radio people attending the show, and I did see a few. Rob, Todd, you mentioned before. Did you see any in the other? You didn't really see too many in the other tracks. I ran into a few that I knew in some of the other tracks, but certainly not as many as in the Jacobs tracks, which I think they were specifically intended for the radio folks, which is probably why the majority of those folks were there. But I guess the biggest takeaway that I got from the show was you had Westwood there, and you have Beasley there in a big way. Who that company's about to launch its own podcast initiative later in the year, and they were kind of looking for pitches. They were looking for podcasts. Westwood had a nice big setup out there, and Beasley was having people connect through an email address looking for podcasters. And so I got to thinking, what's the goal here? Do the podcasters become part of a network. Like you guys are all independent. You're talking about staying independent. The podcasters that were there become a part of a bigger network and give away their independence. But, radio has a big megaphone that they might not be able to, they don't have as a single podcaster. And so are they going to be willing to give that up? And really, what is radio looking for? Are they looking for new stars? Because I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but some radio people have referenced the podcasting industry as the radio's minor leagues. And they don't mean it in a negative way. What they mean is that in the old days, smaller market radio would produce big market talent eventually. So that's kind of gone away. And those smaller market talents are coming from podcasts. And it's been more than a few people that have started out with a podcast that have become big radio stars. So, I mean, it is interesting to see how these two groups are going to come together. I'm not sure how yet, but every company is going to have a podcast strategy, whether the folks in your industry like it or not. They're going to have some kind of podcast strategy, and the big reason for that is they see the money. If you listen to the Scripps conference call yesterday, their earnings call, mid-roll and Stitcher, or 50% increase in revenue, and they use the two magic words that radio always loves to hear, but hardly gets much revenue from, and that's Procter & Gamble. We mentioned that on the conference call yesterday. So the radio folks see the money coming, and that's part of the reason too. They're trying to come up with a strategy to pull some of that money over.
If I look at the conversations I've had with most radio folks over the past, let's just use 3 years, because 3 years ago we really saw a surge in radio folks looking at the space. And the high majority of them, I would say 90%, refused to listen to advice. And they were going to go their way. And most of those initiatives that I've been tracking died because they were going to do it the radio way, and the radio way was the only way. And, that's sometimes you have to learn those lessons the hard way through failures. And I think some of those folks have. But I think the folks that listen to good strategies, number one, and not making 3 hours of drive, 3-hour podcasts, but taking the 8 15-minute segments in there that was really hot stuff and cut those up and put them online as a podcast, that's successful. And as you alluded to, finding podcasters that may fit into some programming they could bring on. Our advice to a lot of radio stations for the past year or so has been, all right, so you're a small station, you've got 15 stations in a couple of markets, and this is largely the small folks that will listen. Let's say you don't have a tech guy, so if you need a tech segment, find a podcaster that you love and bring him on the air for that 5-minute tech spot 4 times a week, or whatever the programming's going to allow, and then put that guy's show on your abcde.com station website, and make that part of a feature of your bring that guy in and have that podcast content sitting there. And some listen to that advice, some don't.
Sure.
But I agree, there's going to be people that are going to raise up into radio. But let's be frank, Ed, I'm looking at you. Your kids are probably grown and out of the house, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I have a 14-year-old, and he gets in the car, and what does he do? He plugs in the headphones. He doesn't want to listen to what Dad's listening to. He's on Pandora or Spotify or something else, listening to music. So it's just a matter of time. Radio's not going anywhere for probably 20 years, but they are definitely on a downward slope, in my opinion.
Well, we've heard that argument before. I hear it all the time.
True.
So, and it may be true at some point. At this point, though, one of the other things that I discovered is no matter how much you guys explain how easy it is to watch your show or listen to your show on your website, because of all the buttons you had there, that was your last show. I've been binge watching your show ever since I got back from Podcast Movement. And no matter how easy you make it, I don't think the average podcaster is as smart as you guys and can figure out how to make it easy. It's so hard right now to listen to a podcast. Only because, and you guys might disagree, there's so many different ways to get it. Even I was trying to figure out on my phone how to get your next episode. Like on Netflix, it says the next episode's coming up in 5 seconds. I think that's a problem for you guys. But right now, radio, you slide into the car, and there's your 8 favorite stations. So that's their advantage right now. The cars are going to change, and there's going to be Wi-Fi, and everyone's going to have Wi-Fi eventually. So maybe you'll be able to say, turn on where I left off, this show or that show in the car, and that's where things will get crazy for radio. But right now it's so easy, and radio has been right on top of the smart speakers to get converted there too. So we'll see what happens. I just think it's so hard right now for the average podcaster to figure out. Okay, you said on your last show, Todd, you need a website, you need to have RSS, and I don't think the average person understands all that. And I was waiting for a scroll on the bottom of your show to say, okay, beginners, you need to watch, session number 12 when we talk about this. That's what I think would be great, the average podcast, because what did I hear? 550,000 podcasters out there. Not all of them are active at this point, but there's probably new ones coming in every day.
Yeah, and I think discovery has been talked to death. And I think we've all know that discovery, some people think it's an issue. Personally, I don't necessarily think discovery is an issue because of the way people find out about podcasts today. It's different. It's, person to person, friend to friend. Listening to content, someone else recommending stuff. We can argue that content discovery is an issue, but that's probably can do a whole. Matter of fact, we've done several shows on just that topic alone.
Yeah.
So when you were in the sessions, what did the attendance look like radio wise? Was there 100, 200, 300 radio? What do you think the count was?
Well, to hear that Hubbard sent 12 of its managers and to see all the Beasley folks there, I think it was probably several hundred. I don't know the count for sure, but the room was always packed. The Jacobs sessions were always packed. I'm not sure they were all radio people or how many seats they had in the rooms. But I think this for sure was the biggest year. And I think in Orlando, you're going to see even more people down there. And, I don't know if Dan and those guys are going to continue those tracks. Maybe the radio show will have tracks of its own for podcasting. I just think for sure radio is getting on this bandwagon. And I don't know what the best relationship is going to be between the two communities, but it is audio. And the consumer doesn't care what you call it. You can call it radio, you can call it podcasting. They're going to get their headphones on, they're going to plug them into their phone, and they're going to listen to whatever they listen to.
Well, I don't think that, I think we've been, and Rob, you can weigh in here. I'm sorry, I'm hogging the mic. We've been wondering when radio was going to join the party, to be honest with you. We wondered when they were going to jump in with both feet. Rob, you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, I think we're on the cusp of that happening. I mean, seeing that big booth that Westwood One had there, and knowing a little bit that some of the other larger groups have expressed to me that they want to have a bigger brand presence at next year's event. That I think that the radio folks, I think this year was kind of like a milestone moment for the convergence. I think a lot of these groups are realizing that there's an opportunity for them to build kind of like almost like a separate business here. I mean, I think if you look at what Westwood is doing, and you look at what iHeart is doing, they're building kind of original content, kind of building a network of shows that is kind of like sitting on top of their national brand, and then they're working with the local stations to help them kind of like take the content that they're producing at the local level and try and optimize it, monetize it, do all those things that they've been kind of like not doing here for many years, and really helping them kind of through that process. It feels like that movement is happening. Ed, if you could talk a little bit about what you're hearing and what you think is coming on that side from both the national and local levels.
Well, I think some of the companies would argue, especially iHeart, that they've been doing it for a long time through iHeart Radio, and they've been doing it with their, especially their big talents, repurposing the morning shows or the afternoon shows and posting them up on their website. So some of them would argue that they've been in it for a while. I guess my question, Todd, would be, what do you want the relationship to be? If there's some kind of divide, where do you want them?
No, I don't think there's I think there's a perception of divide. I want them in with all feet. I want them in on this because let's be frank. And I've said this many times before. They create great content. They're masters of creating fantastic programming.
Yeah.
So from that aspect, they've got a huge, like decades of experience in doing that. So, to me, it's a natural fit that they're going to come in, and it's all a matter of, are they going to be able to put budget on it? If they have,
I guess more specifically though, Todd, what do you want to see them doing with the podcast community?
I'd like to see them same thing. I think that what I said earlier. I think if in the interim, as things are, as digital is making a bigger presence, and if radio starts to slide a little bit, I think they need to boost up their digital strategy, and they do just as you said, and I've been telling radio's folks to do for a while, is to start building a team of podcasters that you can align with and get some content, and it's going to be good for both. So if they go out and pick 20 shows that they like, let's say they want a science show, they want a tech show, they need a lifestyle show, all this stuff maybe they don't have, and segment some of that stuff into their regular programming as they trust the content creators, the great content to go on the radio, or bring them on live. I think it's a great opportunity.
So the question I would have is, how do they pay for that? You're talking about compensating, let's say 10 people, right? So now you're talking about what? Inserting how many ads? And that's the difference between you guys and radio. I mean, if radio dies, it'll be because they're playing 20 commercials an hour.
Right.
And people are just tuning out. And you guys haven't played a single commercial yet on this show.
Yeah, this show this show's non-commercial. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big difference. What happens when a podcaster becomes, a broadcaster, and all of a sudden their podcast is playing, 8 units every 30 minutes? I mean, that's the difference, right?
Well, I think if you're going to transition a podcast to a full show, another hour, let's say he's got an hour on Saturday or something, taking up some of that valuable time that they rent space on, and give that to them, they're definitely going to have those spots, or have to have those breaks. That's going to be something that they're going to have to learn to do within the podcast itself. Yeah, they're going to have to monetize that digital content. But, this, I think, maybe is where, the financing of this and being able to write that check. I think, initially, let's just take a small owner, someone that's got 30 stations, and let's say they're in a southern market. They could go and they could probably align with 20 or 25 shows, and those podcasters probably would be thrilled to have their content syndicated over there without compensation. Now, I'm ducking because people are throwing baseball bats at me already, but there should be a model that lead to monetization, not only on the radio side with rev share, but also on the digital side with some digital advertising too. Local is local, so that local sales team sells that local ad spots into those podcasts that are specifically on that website.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
and Ed, go ahead, Ed.
No, go ahead, Rob.
Well, I was going to change the subject a little bit and just say what I'd like to see, to kind of answer the question you posed earlier about how I would like the relationship between these two communities to work out, is for both sides of this community to respect each other, and we kind of come together, and we don't have this broadcaster meet podcaster track that's separate from all the other tracks from the event, and that both sides look at each other with a level of kind of respect that I think both sides can learn from each other, and that we not separate at this event and go into our cliques, and that we kind of get to know each other, a little bit more on both sides, because I believe both sides have things to learn from each other.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's what I've seen, and frankly, that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years, is trying to bridge that kind of that divide between these two communities. I being a panelist at radio events, and then being a panelist at podcasting events, and trying to meet all these folks on the radio side. Now, granted, I had a little bit of an advantage spending a year working for Podcast One, because that was certainly right in the middle of that combination of those two worlds, and I could see it from a unique perspective. But and that's why I'm talking about what I'm seeing with the radio groups coming into this event is going to become. I think if you look out 2 or 3 years, is going to be kind of like it could be a focus point for the radio industry as you start thinking about talent and you start thinking about the next evolution of radio. And I guess one thing I was hoping that we could talk about today too is, as you look out 10 years from now, Ed, what's your thought on where radio is going to be on the on-demand side and the podcasting side? Do you think it's going to be the primary driver of their thinking and their strategy?
I doubt that. I think it'll always be the over-the-air product that drives them, and that's where they make their money. So I don't know if it'll shift that much. I do think that they're going to continue to get more and more involved in it. And if Caroline Beasley was up on stage and she said that they were there to learn, and I think a lot of them at the show were certainly there to learn, because they really. They think this, they didn't, my perception now, and I'm not speaking for anybody, my perception is they don't want to lose out on podcasting like they kind of lost out at the beginning of digital. They were a little slow to get with digital, and they don't want to make that mistake twice. And they see what Dan's created and what you guys are doing, and it's and they can do it. They have the talent in-house. They can find the talent if they want to. And they have the big megaphone to promote it like nobody else does. So I think it'll always be part of their strategy, but I don't know if I would say it would be the main driver, unless something really changes in the car or everybody decides they're never going to listen to radio again. And that's never really happened. It's a 100-year-old medium, and it's changed over the years. It's not as strong as it once was, but it's still pretty strong. But I think they came to learn, and they came to try and figure out what they want their strategy to be, and how they can make money at it. And if they can make a lot of money at it, they'll get in it a lot more.
Well, it's reassuring, because as little as 3 years ago, I was at a Jacobs event in L.A. Well, it was a Jacobs track in L.A. in an event, a well-known radio event. And as soon as the podcasting track came on, the 350 people almost all got up to a person and went out in the lobby and had a cocktail, while 10 people remained to listen about podcasting. So it's nice it's nice to hear that they're not going to the lobby to have a cocktail during the sessions, and came to. So that is a positive. That's a positive development. Literally, that's kind of what happened at this event. And I was like, wow, I flew to LA to talk to 10 people. That's great. But, So I
have a question for you.
Sure.
I have a question for you guys. Why isn't this show syndicated on radio station?
Yeah, good question.
I mean, here you are. You guys are the experts. The Mount Rushmore of podcasting right here. Two of the heads would be you guys right here. And great content. You guys are entertaining. And you know pretty much the history of podcasting. Why isn't this running Saturday morning on radio station?
Ed, hook us up. Let's go. Let's get this baby syndicated.
Run some spots.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Long as we'll have to negotiate that out. What is every 13 minutes or something? 5 minutes of commercials.
Right.
Right. But the good thing about that is we can keep talking while the commercials are going, and when the clock hits, we come right back.
Well,
and
Ed,
the other question I had is, sorry, Rob. The other question I had is anybody from radio on the IAB committee to talk about measurement, or is anybody from radio on with Dan's group to try and integrate radio, or are there? I know you guys were talking about a podcasting organization on one of the sessions, like the RAB or whatever you would call it. Do you have somebody from radio, like a CEO from radio, that sits in and tries to bring the two groups together?
If they are an IAB member, they are free to join any of the committees. It's you pay your admission fee, and then they designate which company members are going to be involved in the committees, and then they have to decide which they're going to participate. I guess maybe in reverse, I would encourage any of the radio groups or any of the teams that are on are members of the IAB to join the audio measurement committee, because we need their input. But I don't, we had, I think, 36 companies. All the major podcasting companies are represented. There's some of the hosting companies are not, but I think there's a pretty, they can't afford it. But
now, Todd, I think it was you and I at the booth. We had a conversation at the show about the measurement issue. That's a serious issue for podcasters.
Well, no, to be honest with you, it hasn't been, but some people have said it has been. So where the problem lies is there's been a few, and I'll say the word few, bad characters that have caused some issues. So the certification is well overdue, and I think it's something that's going to help the space a lot. The compliance was number one, getting people saying that they are compliant. That was a first step into leveling the playing field. But I think the certification process, as more companies go through that, I think the IB, Emmett told me that he has 6 in the hopper right now that are 3 that are going through the 2 that are going through the process, 1 that's going to start a little later, and 3 more that are basically waiting to sign contracts. So, how many measurement systems are there out there? Well, there's not 36, but there's maybe 15. So I think we'll get this cleaned up pretty quick. I don't know. What do you think, Rob, on that part?
Yeah, I think from what I heard from the IAB folks at Podcast Movement, they're getting people, signing up pretty fast for the certification process. So I think we're going to have a large group of the major podcast hosting platforms all be on board. And I know that that's creating a little bit of nervousness on the part of some other players in the medium that maybe don't want to fully convert over V2 of the IEB specs, because it's gonna lower their numbers. I hate to say it, that's the honest answer to that.
But Rob, at the same point, it lowers their numbers but increases their performance. We keep to reminding people that.
Exactly. That's the inverse of this, is that the ROI, our representation to the advertisers, is going to go up. And my hope and dream here is that will also translate into a long-term CPM growth. But we'll have to see on that.
Now, Rob, you're talking, if there's radio people that are watching or listening to the show, and you're talking about V2 and 12 different ways to measure, and 36 ways to measure, and the whole thing, I can tell you it's going right over their heads. And I don't mean to be negative, but being that we all haven't been in this space very long, it's amazing. I think it'd be amazing to hear that advertisers are actually bringing money to a medium where you really have no measurement system. I mean, that's the way you made it sound. V2, you got downloads, you got people that won't comply, and they're still spending money. That's pretty good. I think there's a misnomer, though, here. So let's be clear. We've had guidelines, per se, the majors, PodTrack.
Well, Todd, we've had guidelines since 2008.
Yeah, since 2008. So there's been a few folks, what really, and I'll be honest with you, misinformed, haven't done the science, are talking out of their ass. I'll be frank. Some folks saying, this is the wild, wild west of podcasting. Measurements all over the place. It's not. And it hasn't been. It's, again, what we've had.
Some players, it's been all over the map,
Some, a couple. Yeah. I mean, let's just be narrow, very narrow here. Very few have been not playing within. They're not counting by ones. They're counting by sixes. So that's an issue. And it's caused CPMs to be forced down because performance dropped, of course. And then, so the battle we went through with the IEB to get this podcast measurement thing locked in was bloody. It was not, and we brought the science to the table. We brought the logs. We brought the proof. It was downright fist fight, in a corporate way.
It took 2 years.
Took two years. And so what we have now is really we're the one. There's only one hang up left that people are complaining about. It's the 24-hour measurement window. And
which means what? What does that mean?
It means that, and there's rules around that. So if you're resetting the counter every 15 minutes, if you zero it out, zero your data collecting and cross-referencing and looking at that.
on downloads.
On downloads. So it's for as an example, if you have a person that is resetting the clock every 15 minutes and I start listening to your show right now, I stop, I go in and I haven't subscribed. That's an important distinction here. I go in the kitchen, I get a cup of coffee and I grab a sandwich and 10 minutes later I come back in the office and I hit play again. For some people that's a 2 and that's really a 1. And on the 24-hour window, basically if I come back 8 hours later and hit play again and I'm not, quote unquote, again, not subscribed, that's still a 1. And with certain, you come into the same type of device, same type of app. So there's rules around that. But we've seen over the years that when people are subscribed to a show, and people hate the word subscribe in this space, matter of fact, they're trying to kill the word subscribe, even at this show, when people are subscribed, within the first literally seconds of a show coming online, we see this spike. And within the first 24 hours, all the automated aggregators have downloaded the subscribed podcast in full. Then, of course, intermixed in that is you got a few people are listening on websites, a few people are listening just by clicking play on demand without being subscribed. And over the next 72 to 96 hours, that curve goes down and then it flatlines for most shows after 96 hours. So the science behind the measurement is not that complicated, but this 24-hour window is super critical. And, we've got years and years and years and years of data to show that that's the right number.
So my to bring it back to radio, and if I was sitting in front of the Fort Myers Honda general manager and just explained to him the way you explained it to me, his head would spin around 50 times before he bought the podcast that I was talking about. So that was the only point.
I think
to try and understand it simply.
Yeah.
So I know my show is being downloaded 5,000 times a week or whatever.
Yep.
50,000 times a month. That's where I think you guys are going to explode with revenue.
The story really is on the sales side is we bill on the download, and that's the science of it. There's no other there's no client side. This is all server side data. We bill on the download. So long as you're measuring your downloads within the spec, this data is better than anything else. I mean, it is client side would be better, but it is.
Well, that's what the RAD initiative is.
Yeah, it's as close
from National Public Radio.
It's as close to perfect as you can get.
So if I download, if a show downloads 10,000 times, and the beginning content of that show is so bad, 9,000 people never listen to past the first 10 minutes, and so the guy's Honda ad is never heard. He's still going to get credit and have to pay 10,000 downloads.
Not with the story we can tell now. We can look at the Apple Podcast data. And we can look on a show-by-show basis and see the percentage of completions on that show. We can see where they're losing the audience.
Okay.
It's a not a full picture.
It's like a sample.
It's a sample. It's a sample.
Yeah.
So we can tell that story. We couldn't do that a year ago, but we've already people that are it's just an education process we have to do with these folks to make them understand. But here's the thing: DR is performing. DR is performing very, very well, better than almost any other medium from a ROI standpoint. So that's the story, that DR is performing. Now, brand advertisers, I think once we get everyone in compliance and everything done, then the brand advertisers are going to come and say, okay, I'm going to spend $1 million in this buy, deliver me 100 million impressions or 100 million downloads, and we'll write you a check. I think that's a done deal when that happens. But we got to get Procter and Gamble. We got to get them in here and writing those big checks, and the Geicos and the Fords, and the DR is good feeder stuff, but the real money's in the brand stuff.
So I wanted to also mention that one of the key observations that I took away from Podcast Movement was, what it appeared to be the collaboration and communication and cooperation between public radio and the commercial broadcasters out there at the event. I think that there's, I don't know, Ed, if you can chime in on this too. Do you think that the commercial radio side is really looking at public radio and saying what they've been doing over the last 10 years is something that we can learn from, and maybe somewhat mirror in what they're doing on the podcasting side.
Well, without a doubt. I mean, it's no secret that NPR has been brilliant at it for so long, and having the CEO there, Jacobs having the CEO there from NPR was just a great get, and he was excellent at explaining how they can tell the longer stories, and they have storytellers every day telling the news in a story. Every news story can be longer than it can be on a commercial radio station. So I think for sure they look at NPR as the radio company that's done a great job at it. And so yes, the answer is yes. I mean, as much as they can interact with those folks and learn from them, just like you can learn from you, they're going to do it.
Someone asked in the chat room, does the RAB recognize the IAB or even talk to them about these standards? I think the answer to that at this point is probably no, because it's
about the podcasting standards.
Yeah, about the measurements, because it's really two completely different animals.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's even different from streaming. And here's the tricky part. We've got Spotify that is making a huge surge, and they're going to have probably roughly maybe 60% of all active podcasts on their platform. There's probably 40% out there that they're not getting because they're self-hosting or whatever reason they can't get on. But so 60% of these shows that are active right now are getting new audience listens on Spotify. But right now, we don't have a story on how to build that because they're streaming. They're not downloading. So the podcasting space is, and same thing with iHeartRadio, same thing with if Pandora comes on, same thing with Google Play. These are all streams. These aren't downloads. Yeah. So now we've got these new numbers coming into the mix. And how do I bill for Spotify when it's not apples and apples, it's apples and oranges, and the two numbers mean two different things. So
what you're saying is if your show is streamed through Spotify, you're not getting counted as a download for them. So
no.
you couldn't say, okay, so what about when Google starts taking over things?
Google,
how is that going to work?
Google right now
is
download. Yeah, downloading.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. We were obviously worried about that.
How do you get around that? I mean, Spotify is going to keep growing. How do you get around that?
Well, you tell us we battle Spotify till they allow pass through so that they don't stream, and it's on demand like it is anywhere else. That's how and it also fixes the ad injection problem when you're trying to change an ad, 2 weeks into an episode. So because they cache everything now, so the key is to get to Spotify to do pass through, similar to what Stitcher did. And believe it or not, I don't know why they don't do it, because it takes they don't have to pay for that bandwidth. I do.
Isn't Spotify using all your podcasts to act as a network and then stream it, and then they're running ads across it? So what's the benefit to them?
Well, the benefit to them would be, there would be really no. The only benefit would be is the podcasters would be more inclined to work a little bit better with them and promote them, because then those that are running ads can change their ads if they need to. I think that's one part. Spotify is an interesting animal right now, and it's amazing to see the feeding frenzy going around the podcast space, how people love it. But it's just a whole new generation of listeners is what it is.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a technology hurdle for them too. If you think about the kind of the code design that they have for their platform, it's been focused on streaming. So for them to all of a sudden change course and do pass through and enable downloads and stuff is a completely different kind of programming orientation that they had to bring to their platform. Plus, there's another side to it too here, and that's what's their business model with podcasting. As you look to the future, it could be that they want to sell advertising against podcasts separate from the show selling it from the main hosting platform, which is currently what the model is today. I mean, most of the podcasts that do dynamic ad insertion basically are wanting to have pass-through connections with distribution platforms like Spotify versus caching platforms, which means, like what Todd was saying, you can't replace the ads. And that's becoming more and more important to content creators that want to utilize dynamic ad insertion. But the problem is Spotify is blocking that from happening. But Spotify at the same time isn't enabling a rev share on ad insertion just to their platform, which I believe may be their long-term goal here.
But they're currently not monetizing. Sorry.
No,
it sounds like you. It sounds like you guys, the podcasters, are going through the same kind of dilemma with Spotify's radio was going through with digital at the beginning. The radio folk, you all want to be seen and heard wherever people are. You don't want to create a hurdle for your listeners. They're going to listen on Spotify. You want to be heard on Spotify, but you can't get any credit for that. And so radio, when digital started to really take off, should we push people to listen online? Should we push people to listen to an app when we know we're not really going to get credit for it? And eventually, you got to go where the consumers want to listen, and take it for what it is at that point.
I think there's definitely going to be some growing pains, but I think we're well aware of these issues, and obviously radio had the same problem.
Yeah.
So I think that we're just going to have to continue to talk to the Spotify team. I had to laugh because I had a podcaster that reached out to us and said, "How do I get my royalties from Spotify?" And I'm like, "There's no royalties for podcast," And I said, "Reach out," and I said, "Reach out to Spotify on Twitter and see what they have to say about that." So, so you got now creators that are starting to think about their content the same way as someone that's creating music and say, "I want my royalties for my content. You're playing it over there. You've got access to it. Write me a check." And we'll see how that's going to work out, right? But I think that as long as we keep the communications going, we're good. We're going to figure out a way. I'm going to bill against Spotify. We're just going to have to disclaim, here's what was listened on Spotify, and we're going to have to look at I'm going to have to use DR as my benchmark. I'm going to say, okay, I was getting X performance out of this show strictly on download counts, and let's add the Spotify numbers in the buy. Let's see what happens to and I'm just going to have to see, because the data coming back to them is very much incomplete. They have it, and they know how much of that show got listened to and they got better data. They've got the client side data that we need, but they're not reporting it currently on an episode.
But what about every other podcaster on your network that you guys host? I mean, they don't have the time and the expertise to do that like you do, and I'm sure they want to know how many streams are coming through Spotify, and they can add it to their downloads and go to the guy up to the corner store and say, "Hey, listen, I've got X amount of people. Let me do a live read for you? At least to pay for my gas to get to the get to the corner."
We provide a platform for them. They have a statistics login, and they have all this information basically at their fingertips. So. On each of the platforms, Rob's and everyone has stats, so it's it's a little format a little bit different. I do want to go back to the podcast movement piece a little bit, because I know we've drifted here a little bit. What did you get any kind of people whispering in your ear, talking about anything, any initiatives you can talk about, or anything that you're hearing that that you can talk about that won't get you in trouble
on the radio side?
Yeah.
I tried to get some more details on what Beasley's working on. They said they were going to release a new initiative later in the year that Buzz Knight is going to head. And my guess is, and nobody's told me this, my guess is they're going to try and start a network somehow too of podcasters, because they were asking for people to get in touch with them through a website or an email address and see what else can they do? Maybe they're trying to hire talent. I don't think is a bad thing.
Why would Beasley do that themselves? Why wouldn't they go through Podcast One? They've got a stake in Podcast One.
No, that's a great question. I don't really know what their initiative is. I know several of their folks already do podcasts, but I'm not really sure. And I did not hear any whispering from other companies that I honestly think Todd, they were there to learn. They were really there to learn, and because they're a little behind. And I take them at their word for that. They certainly learned a lot. I mean, I went there to learn, and it was amazing how many vendors that were there. It was amazing how many people that were there, how many podcasters off the street that were there that were just trying to learn how to be better, which microphone to use, things like that. And I think they were there to try and figure out how some of these podcasters are doing so well, and how maybe they could alter their strategy to see if they could make more money at it, or build their podcasting platform. I don't think anybody there thinks that 10 years from now that's going to be the primary way to deliver their content, but I think they want to have something ready to roll soon if they don't already.
Yeah,
so I really think they did learn a lot.
And I spoke out of turn. It was Hubbard that has a stake in Podcast One, not Beasley. So that's why they're not going through Podcast One. So
maybe they are.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they're there and listening, and the Jacobs folks obviously are, got that connection with that space in a big way. So they're perfect facilitators of getting them in. I hope they join the party with both feet. Let's be frank. Nothing, so I think we've seen a couple of influencers in the space that's helped drive the podcast adoption. I look at when Larry King was still on CNN, and he was, or whatever network he was on, he was always talking, hey, listen to my podcast, listen to my podcast, listen to my podcast. And then, we're hearing this now with some national advertising on different networks. iHeart's got it. So just spreading the word of podcasting is good. Get that radio megaphone and get those audiences that are listening to radio hearing about podcasting being promoted on the air. Our local guy that does a drive here that's real popular, he's doing Facebook Live now. So I'm thinking, okay, you're doing a little digital play here. Smart. Maybe a little behind. Maybe should have been doing that a couple of years ago, but at least he's doing it. So I'm encouraged that they're looking at it, but I just budget wise, that's when I always just wonder, will they put budget on it? Because a lot of these folks are cash strapped.
Yeah, I don't see them making major investments in it, unless they can tell there's going to be a return on that investment real quick. So you're right about that. We'll see what happens. But one of the other things, as you were mentioning, the guy up the street doing Facebook Live, if some of these podcasters that listen to your show or watch your show want to see their numbers go up, they should buy some ads on a local radio station. See what happens after that, because that will work. I
think what's interesting, though, is because there's very few podcasts that are local. So would that, is that going to have the same bang for the buck? Yeah, you're going to get a very local audience, but this audience is worldwide, and most podcasters are too. So this is also a challenge for radio, because radio is local. And Rob has always been a proponent of local podcast. In a big market.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, in a big market, you can probably pay some bills with that, but that won't work, work in major markets.
It's all about growing the overall listener base.
Yeah.
Once that happens, it's all about building audience in local markets, which translates into scale for the whole industry. So, I mean, we've got to build. We have to figure out a way as an industry to, like what Ed was talking about. I mean, a lot of the topics we've talked about today, they're all like pieces to this puzzle, right? We've got to figure out a way to grow audience in the medium, but it also, for the radio folks, it's got to make financial sense to invest in doing that, right? I think they have a role in helping grow audience in the on-demand podcasting realm, but they're not going to really jump, like you said, they're not going to jump in with both feet until they see a pathway that kind of rolls up all these issues, right, of metrics and these platforms, making it easy for people to find podcasts, kind of like what built radio in the car, right? Simplicity. Nice. I agree with you, Ed. I think simplicity is key, but to some degree, this is a generational thing too, right? The young people today are more accustomed to complexity, right? I think it's the older generation that is confused and not as into being accepting of the complexity and getting it right. And I think that's part of why this is probably going to be a shift that happens over the next 5 to 10 years. It's not going to happen like 2 years from now.
Well, Todd, just to touch on your earlier point about, I think you said your daughter is 14 or
her son is, yeah.
Son is 14. Well, my daughter's 21, and we went out to breakfast yesterday, and I asked her if she listened to podcasts, and she said she surprising to me, she said she did, and then she said she listens to podcasts of people she follows on YouTube. And for somebody I'm in my 50s, I mean, that you're right, Rob. That's a completely different generation. You're watching YouTube and then listening to podcasts. She's not listening to the radio.
Yeah,
is what really she said. She's doing all the other listening somewhere else.
I think if we look at the progression of time, when we had broadcast TV, you got what you got on your TV. And, where I grew up, I had 4 channels: 3, 6, 8, and 14. Those were the channels I had as a kid. ABC, CBS, NBC, and some religious broadcaster. I lived in the sticks. And then cable came, and then we went from 4 channels to 5,000, literally. 5,000 channels of junk, 10 channels of actually good content, and then you look at radio, where radio's transitioned. In going into the car, you get in your car today, and I got a 2009 Mazda CX-9, and I turn the car on, and it defaults when you turn it on to, well, it's at least it's smart enough to know what I had set for the last time, whether it be AM, FM, or the Bluetooth. It used to be you turn the car on, it was AM, or you turn the car on, it was FM. That was the choice. So just in a few short years here, 9 years, my in-dash experience is, we use the word caca here in Hawaii, and that's bird crap. It is, if I look at that and think of what my next vehicle will have, and Ford has already said they're going to put, it's going to come with the Ford package. The battle for AM FM is really in that dashboard, and as cars get older and updates. So if Pandora is a selection when that loads, because people are going to be writing checks to be that default icon that shows up, that's a money center now for for car manufacturers.
I think radio's advantage, as long as they keep doing it, is local. And people want to hear the local weather. They want to hear the local morning team jibber jabber back and forth and pick on each other. And Pandora doesn't provide that. A local podcaster could provide that, and if they can figure out how to do it, and they're entertaining, it's always about the entertainment. But that's one thing. Radio, from every small market to medium market to the major markets, they've got a connection with those talents on the air in the morning and the afternoon, and that's going to be tough to beat.
Yeah,
and it's been like that for a long time.
But if I also look at it too, is I'm getting ready to get in my car to take my kid to school, because he goes to a public school, but in a location where I have to take him to. Google's telling me, and it's weird. I get this pop up on my phone saying, "Hey, commute time's 43 minutes," and so I know where my commute or I have ways. So I think over time, again, I think radio still got 20 years at least. Let's be, it's a multi-billion-dollar market. It's not going away any soon. But radio is definitely going to change. And if podcast is the route for them to evolve and stay relevant and get ahead of the, what happened to them when the digital age comes in, then good. I think we've served a purpose here. And the beauty of this is it's open for all comers, and there's no gatekeepers. And that's something, Rob, maybe we should just talk a little bit about on this show today in relation to podcast movement. I felt, and maybe it's just a feeling, but whisper here, talk there, that there's the openness of the space is really resented by some, and they would like to close that up a little bit. But I think the genie is way out of the bottle. I don't think that'll ever be possible. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, why don't you expand on that, Todd, a little bit? Are you thinking that there's an influence of trying to make it more closed versus open, or you think it's the opposite?
Well, I think it's more of an option. They want it more closed, because when it's more closed, it's more controlling. I might be wrong on this, but I kind of walked away with that feeling, and we've seen undercurrents of this for a long time. But I just don't think with RSS being the equalizer here that that's ever going to be possible. I don't think they're going to, that, and maybe what triggered it is everyone's looking to sign talent, sign content. Every person that came to the booth looking for content, and
and we don't control the content. I mean, if you look at both of our platforms, we don't control the content. We're just a tool provider and distribution provider.
And when I tell people, I don't have no one signed. They're my customer. They pay me for a service, but I don't control their content. And people look at you like, they give you that look like, how's that? It almost like their mind explodes. They say, how's that possible?
So I have a question for you guys. I heard the number 550,000 podcasts out there, or podcasters, and not all of them are active right now. But so what percentage of the 500 or whatever the number is are actually making enough money to make a living at it?
Well, let me give you the active number. I think my slide said that there was 109,000 shows that have created at least one episode within the last 90 days. And if we go and stretch that out to a year, that probably pushes us to 125. So let's use 20% of active shows right now. Okay. So of that let's say that 109,000, what do you think, Rob? 10%?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the industry is trying to change that with these more, programmatic ad platforms. I know that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to open it up and provide revenue to more podcasters. But yeah, it's probably 10 to 15%, probably. Yeah.
But even from the beginning of time, from the beginning when we started doing ad deals in 2005, let's just be frank. Some people got gas money. Some people got dinner money. Some people got car payment money. Some people got house payment money, and some people got quit your day job money. Yeah. There's multiple layers of levels of earnings here.
So 10% of podcasters are making a living at it.
Well, okay, making a living, making money. Let's say 10%, 10 to 15% are making money. Those that are actually can quit their day job. Oh, maybe 3%.
Okay, so 3% of the podcasters can quit their day job. 100% of the people on the air and radio are making a living at it. So.
That's true.
Yeah. So,
but
yeah.
But the talent is controlled. The talent has to do programming, and the talent, and that comes at that's the price of having a full-time job. So yeah.
Well, but there is a whole other side to this, Ed, too, and there's a lot of podcasters that don't have the goal of making money directly from their show either.
Yeah, there's at least 60%.
There's other business models in podcasting that is different than radio. And that's the donation model. There's also just doing a podcast to build your expertise in your area of business, building customers, building customer relationships that translates into other types of transactions. So that is not directly related to the podcast. So there's probably another, and I don't think, Todd, we have any kind of an idea of what percentage of the podcast community is making revenue off of other products and services.
I think it's probably another 10 or 15%, or maybe 20%.
Yeah. It's probably more than are making money off of advertising, would be my guess.
Yeah, they use it as part of their funnel, their sales funnel, to get clients and to get consulting, and so it runs the gambit. I think that again, you've got a lot of folks that are also just hanging out with their buds or their girlfriends and doing a show just to talk, and they don't care. And there has always been 3 categories of podcasters: the hobbyists that they're doing it for fun and having a great time and build great loyal audiences. Number 2, it's kind of the middle of the road guy that's got a day job, but yet he's doing a podcast twice a week, and he's he's getting some money to take the significant other to dinner or whatever. And then there's the third group that's they're in it. They know what they want to do. They're focused, and they're building
audiences and building a business.
They're spending money on advertising. They're marketing. They're doing all those things a normal business would do to build revenue.
So if you guys had something that you wanted to say to all, I always ask people this at the end of an interview. If you had the 40 most powerful people in radio in one room and you had a chance to say something to them, what would you say to them?
I think that it's time to invest in this space, but invest wisely. I think the model that we talked about at the very beginning of the show, Eddie, I didn't tell you what to say, but I think you came up with the analogy right. There's a lot of great talent out there. You look at where I came from. I worked on airplanes in the Navy for 25 years. That was my background before I pulled up the microphone. I had no clue. And I'm not necessarily the most well-spoken. I destroy the English language on every 30 seconds here. But there's a lot of great folks out there creating a lot of great content. And I think the radio folks are well-positioned to take advantage of that. If I was going to invest, I would find shows that you love, line them with each station that fits. If it's a country station, then you need country-related shows, gun shows. If it's a hip-hop station, then you need to align with some folks that are doing interviews with artists. And so there's this whole litany of content that they could tap as the minor league. Let's use that term, and people are going to get pissed I said that, but let's use that as the minor league and move them into the, using part of the farm. If that was radio, if I was a guy with a little budget, I'd do that. It's easy.
Well, and also I think radio has a role of working with the business side and working with advertisers and working with agencies to get them to change a little bit of what they do, to make the business and the content that they create on the advertising side to be more compatible with the on-demand world, on the digital world, which is different than broadcast radio. So I think that they have a lot of, reach and ability to work with advertisers and ad agencies to start shifting more towards more authentic ads, working with hosts, getting those folks to start thinking differently. I know that a lot of the podcasting networks and platforms have been trying to drive this message to the ad agencies as well, but I believe that the radio folks have a role to play in this too, to get these agencies to start thinking about native ads for podcasting that are more compatible with podcasting. Because, as we move into this programmatic age, and I know that's what we're trying to do at Voxnest and Spreaker, is to drive advertising campaigns into larger groups of shows. But we need to have ads that are more compatible with the medium. And that's key, I think, as you look to the future.
But if you look, Rob, at what radio has done this, the podcasting did not invent in any way, did not invent live reads.
No, not at all. No, I agree.
For
some reason, we still keep seeing these yelling in your face ads, that are coming out and going into radio, and I think that's part of the change that needs to happen here.
But if you take, the reason why, and I tell media buyers this all the time, and they just stare at me when I say this, because they just don't believe it. I tell them that, okay, if you think about a radio market, let's think about a guy here in Hawaii. His name's Rick Hamad. He does a morning drive. I don't know what his market share is. Don't care. But he's a popular guy on the radio here. People have listened to him for years, and they trust him. And when he says, hey, Ford's having a sale, I went down and drove the whatever. I want you guys to go check that out. That was an ad, but it was an endorsement. People in the audience say, hey, Rick said the car was cool. Let me go down and check it out. And then they run some other stuff intermixed in there that that Rick isn't endorsing. It's just some remnant ad or whatever that's running, some, Viagra product or whatever. But if you have the podcasters with these small niche audiences have the same power as these local radio guys. And I tell the media buyers, I said, the smaller shows actually have more performance than the bigger shows because they have more intimate relationship with their audience members, and the audience members trust them. So, but yet the media buyers are so focused on the top 3 or 5%, they're leaving hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising revenue just on the floor. It's so much content that could be, it drives me insane. But
well, and it's unduplicated audience too.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the other thing that I think the industry doesn't think about sometimes, is that if we could figure out a way to run campaigns across 1,000 shows,
which we used to do a lot.
Yeah, right. Then you're going to reach a much larger audience base than if you're focused on just running campaigns on 3 to 5 shows, which is typical.
3 to 5 shows where you're getting 20 spots a month, where you're running on 1,000 and you get 4 to 5,000 spots a month. It's the radio model, but using the podcast. Because what does radio get? 4 spots or 5 spots an hour?
But Todd, I can say you're voicing the same frustration the radio people. You're voicing the same frustration the radio people have with media buyers. We hear it all the time. So I was just, it felt like I was watching a radio executive right here.
That's funny.
Talking about media buyers. It's the same
I think we're all in the same boat. Thing. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what's going to drive this medium forward is to empower the content creator to contribute to this. Now, granted, there is an opportunity, I think, for talent reads to come into play here too, a little bit more. But technology is going to be part of the solution here, and I think it is kind of the responsibility of Todd and I to play a role in this as well, right? And how do we effectively and efficiently manage campaigns? Todd's been trying to solve this problem for years of trying to manage campaigns across 1,000 shows, right? And cater to all the needs of the agencies that they want to review the live reads. Any changes need to be able to be easily communicated across large groups of shows. How do we technologically solve this stuff? And I think we're all working on that. And
it sounds like the same stuff a radio network has to go through. Right, Todd? Same stuff.
Yeah.
Because guess what? Podcasts are radio just being delivered digitally, in my opinion.
Right.
Well, that's true to a certain degree.
Yeah, to a certain degree. We don't have a commercial every 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's a little different, and the content's different too. And there's less time restrictions.
Yeah.
There's less being forced into a certain kind of genres of content. I think there's less control, and I think that's one of the things that radio needs to grapple with too. Is they're used to controlling this, but they're also, radio has been kind of like a hit-driven medium. Podcasting is not really. I mean, it is, but it isn't in some ways, right? We're trying to gather audience, right? We're trying to gather as much as we can, and the only way to do that is to have enough variety and genres that will appeal. So,
whereas I think the radio model is, if you take, I think the Cumuluses and the Beasleys, and they're going to get big teams. They got a lot of smart people. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at and I know that the day and age of small owners where they own 10 stations is lagging. I know there's not that many left. And maybe, Ed, maybe you can tell us how many of those small station owners are across the country. But I think for those folks, when they're trying to survive and pay the bills, I think podcasting, to me, I would be in it with vigor and finding talent to fill content in their hours of content that they have to put online. Sure, they're syndicating Rush and all those other folks, but why not syndicate some of their own content?
Well, the majority of the radio stations are owned by small groups and mom and pops. There are 10,000 radio stations out there, and so my question is, who's pitching them from your side? I mean, is somebody out there pitching these shows? Are these folks going out there pitching them these shows? This show should be on hundreds of radio stations.
Yeah, we go to NAB. We go to NAB and we talk to as many of these folks as we can, but we all run in different circles. So I think podcast movement is helping close that gap.
For sure.
And people like you can get the word out and say, hey, this is what you need to pay attention to. I think, were you the one that wrote the piece that was talking about, it made the rounds the other day. I think it was a Radio Inc. article. Oh gosh, I don't off the top of my head. It was basically broadcasters, we told you so, and now you're finally. Maybe it wasn't. What was it? I'll have it up in the show notes. Can't remember the total topic, but I had to laugh because I read through it and I was like, "Yep." Same ironies of you don't miss the boat this time.
Yeah.
Did you when you were at the event then, Ed? Did as far as the I know you said in a lot of the radio sessions, how did you feel that content came across? Because some of it was being talked by the radio folks. Did they have very many people on from the independent side as well?
Let's see. I think it was great watching Elsie Escobar moderate a panel of radio executives because a lot of I don't want to offend anybody on my side, but a lot of the times it's kind of scripted when the executives are up there, and it was nice for her to get up there and say just put it all out there and them have an honest conversation. So that I thought that was excellent. That panel was excellent. So yeah, I think there was a good mix of podcasters getting on stage with the broadcasters and trying to work together. A lot of the times, I maybe this was just me, but a lot of the times the podcasters talk about things that go completely over my head, and I could see some eyes glazing over too, because from the radio folks, they're just trying to start to get into it and understand it. And you guys have been doing it for so long. Sometimes, Todd, I'll be watching your show with Rob, and you guys will be talking about things, and the beginner, there's no way the beginner gets it. So it was good for them to be there. I still think there should have been more people there, and I think you're going to see more people there in Orlando next year, because when Google says they're getting involved and Spotify is involved, and I saw the interview with you guys, the Google guy, and he said that their goal is to double the amount of podcast listeners in X amount of time. Well, that's a big deal.
Big deal.
Yeah, and if they're going to get involved, it's only going to get bigger. So what was the Edison number? 17% of the consumers listen to podcasts. That's still a small number. So
on a weekly basis, yeah, on a weekly.
Right.
Yeah.
Were you able to get into the when the Google rep, Troy was up there talking during his big kind of, it wasn't a keynote, but it was in the keynote room. Did you get to listen to Kyle? Yeah. Did you get to listen?
I didn't.
Yeah, there was that session. There was a couple of things said that made my eyeballs bulge a little bit, and
what were they?
Well, I think Google is left on the table that they want to compete in a big way, and that they could be a disruptor to companies like mine, and if they so choose to. Now, I don't know if they're going to do that or not, but I have to be prepared if they do. So it is it's an interesting time. Google having been out largely on the sidelines for many years, and when the 8,000-pound gorilla comes up, everyone's excited about it. But I'm going to tell you straight up that change could come, and they're serious. So it's good, and at the same time, well, it's good for content creators. Business owners might have some challenges.
I mean, if you look at Google's history, you can certainly draw some conclusions that is definitely a possibility. I mean, look at what YouTube did to the video industry. I think it is a potential disruptor as well, and we'll see if that plays out that way or not, or the strength of the medium has built so strong as an independent medium that no one company can come in and do that to the medium. We'll have to see how that plays out. But Google is a very large elephant that just walked into our room. So,
but I also look at as a rounding error right now for the amount of money being spent. We're only at 300 million.
That's probably the only thing that saves us, Todd.
That's right.
I did get the impression that more people were concerned about Google than they were about radio. I did get that impression.
Well, that was a very large back post show having a cocktail discussion point. And there was another company out there that was discussed pretty heavily too, which we probably will get into a little later. Once I don't know how much time you've got here, Ed, but I think that Google is definitely is going to move the space here, and it'll be interesting to see how Apple responds to this too, because Apple is they've had a free run here for 14 years. Or 13 years, because they came into the space in July of 2005 with the introduction of podcast iTunes, which was an inflection point. So I think with Google, they're going to definitely be another inflection point. But the true, what will really be the true indicator is, I'm watching. We're going to watch month to month and see if they start moving the needle. If they move the needle, And then the needle being, do I see their Google Podcast app, and do I see Android share starting to close the gap? I see them start adding numbers and also gaining on percentage. If they add 2 million people to the space, that number should go like this, and in Android being 2/3 larger than the iOS audience. If this happens, and I guess we'll see over the next year.
I mean, Todd, I think that it's going to happen. I'm just not sure it's going to happen as fast as I think we're concerned it's going to happen. And I'm not sure why. It may be. I think it gets back to a lot of what Ed said very early, is that it is complicated for people to figure out how to do this. And I think certainly Google, by putting discovery into Google search, you would think would simplify it. But I also think that maybe the complexity of their solution maybe goes over the top of certain people's heads. It appears to be simple, but in practical terms, it's hard to communicate exactly how to make all that work. That app is not default installed on Android.
No, but here's the great equalizer. On Google.com, if they do this, let's say I search for my main show, Geek News Central, and on that little header up there says all news, videos, image, shopping.
Yeah.
If they add the link podcast to that, if they add podcast there or audio,
it could change. It could change.
No, it will. No. You're talking to a guy that relies on Google for a large percentage of his audience growth every month.
Yeah.
So that's game over. Boom.
Well, like I mentioned when Kyle was on the show, Google has had audio up there before.
It's Zach, not Kyle. We both got it wrong.
Yeah, Zach. Sorry. Yeah, Zach. Sorry, Zach. I don't know why I was thinking Kyle.
Yeah, I was thinking Troy. I don't know why.
Yeah, right. But Google in the past, and I'm talking back in the mid 2000s, had audio up there.
Right.
And they dropped it because people just didn't use it to find content. There was a lot of content that would come up there because back in those days it was kind of like people posting MP3 files, right? And streaming links and things like that were the hot thing back then. But I did get a sense when Zach was talking about adding that up there, he seemed to be intrigued by it because I think it would drive, like you say, it certainly would drive a lot of traffic to the medium.
And I apologize for those of you on YouTube right now. Definitely having some internet connectivity issues. The stream is still there, but it may not be as good a quality.
Well, guys, it's okay. I got to run.
Yep.
All right. I am going to work on the syndication thing, though. I promise, Todd.
I think that would be wonderful. I think you know what? Really, our job. If anyone, and Ed, as far as listening to the show, if you go back to episode 1 and listen to all 215 episodes, you can just get a PhD in this space. So it's Rob and I cover it all in oftentimes colorful, passive aggressive type of ways. So it's it's definitely good content all the way back. But I don't know if you could handle listen to both of us bicker for 300 some hours.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on so much. It's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing it again.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for being on.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Yep.
Thanks, Ed.
So, interesting perspective.
Yeah, I think it was one that was needed given what we saw at Podcast Movement. I think a lot of people were asked. I think there was a couple of articles that came out talking about how podcasters are a little bit I guess cautiously interested in why radio is having such a big presence now. So I think it was good to kind of I want to bring those worlds together. I want the radio folks to embrace the podcasting side, and I want the podcasting folks to embrace the radio side, and we all kind of talk together, hang out together, spend time together, and hopefully this this divide that still I think somewhat exists starts to drift away.
I take exception to the divide. Okay.
Well, it's a perceptional thing. It's a perceptional thing. Is what it is right now.
Yeah,
it's not in reality.
But it's also they haven't been hanging out with us for 10 years, so that's some of it too.
Well, I have been, and I know you have been, but I'm not sure that most of the podcasting industry has.
Right.
So, yeah.
So should we talk about the other company that was talked about at the show a lot?
Well, sure. We can talk a little bit about that.
So talk about the pitch. How did you like that 45-minute pitch? No instruction. How did you like that 45-minute pitch from Anchor?
Well, it was a little surprising to me. It certainly, the title of the session didn't represent that it was going to be an Anchor VC pitch.
No.
But that's kind of what it was. It was kind of a VC pitch minus the financials.
Right.
So it was all about that. And I'm not sure that really is what Dan and Jarrett want at their event. So, I mean, it was really curious. I mean, I was curious to see what they were pitching and what they were talking about, but I'm not sure that was cool with Podcast Movement that he did that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they'll go back and review the recording of that event, but I think that once they got into Q&A, and anything is, I'm sitting in the back, I can't ask the questions. I wish I could have gave someone like 10 questions to ask, because the questions were, they were frankly horrible. From addressing some of the concerns that they have, but they even, a few of these, who owns the content, that type of stuff, and, they soft padded it all work, creator community first, and but it sure is not spelled out that way in their terms of service. He can use all the language he wants to describe how they're a creator community first, but they couldn't even, they were talking about the reuse and what happens with the reuse and ownership rights on that. And he didn't have a story straight there. So, because there was a couple lawyers in the room that asked some questions. You got to respect what they're attempting to do. But
they're attempting to be a disruptor, is what they are.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm still
take a different approach. Yeah.
I'm still concerned about the creators out there, and also as I've done my internal analysis on what's going on over there. I'll just say this: it would be a good exercise for someone that had some time to go out and look at how many pod-faded shows there is, the percentage of pod-faded shows in their network. I think that would be a great exercise for someone to take. It's probably a story that they wouldn't want being published.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a complicated thing. If you think about Anchor, and Castbox is another one of these.
Well, Castbox is an app. Castbox is a decent app.
Well, no, I'm not. What I'm trying to portray here is that whenever you get venture capital driving these companies, right, they tend to drive towards rapid and fast growth, which means that they tend to be a fast burn kind of situation, right? And that term actually applies to how they spend their money too. Because they're trying to grow fast, because the expectations of those investors is hockey stick growth, right?
Right.
So you look at what Anchor is trying to do. They're basically coming into this medium as almost like a little bit of a wrecking ball, right? They're coming in and challenging all of the conventions that has existed around how things are done in this medium, in the effort, as they said up on stage, to simplify, right? That's their justification for breaking everything is that they want to make it easier for people to create a podcast and publish a podcast and get it out there and get it faster. That is a two-sided edge, right? I mean, it cuts both ways for them. You make it easy, then more people come in, more people produce content, but maybe they weren't as committed to it as what probably they would like. I would think that a fast burn of their users is probably not good long term for their investors. I think it maybe look good from quarter to quarter, but maybe it's not good in the long run.
I think if when someone made the revelation that they're hosting their media on S3, and I'm like, why would they do that? That's not a CDN. It's cost prohibitive just to host media on S3. Anyone that's in the podcasting business that has any type of true volume, and I'm talking about hundreds of terabytes of traffic, would never. I mean, that's just like giving someone free money over at Amazon. That just the sign that they're not. And again, this is third party that said they're using S3, and if that turns out to be wrong, I would not even be surprised in the least, because it doesn't absolutely make no sense to me whatsoever. But if they are using S3, that tells me they have no bandwidth bill, and that's why the comments that they made in their blog post that their customers are costing them like a penny or something, and if
that's because nobody's listening, right?
Right. It's not there's truly no bandwidth being used. When you get to the point where you can't pay your bandwidth bill with a credit card and you have to do a bank transfer, let me tell you something. That's a bandwidth bill.
Yeah, right.
Okay, that's real money leaving your bank account, sometimes on a weekly basis. And if I was on S3, Rob, I would be out of business.
Yeah, right. And the CEO of the company got up on stage and said that they're not focused on listening. They're focused on creators.
What?
Yeah, that's what he said up on stage there, because he got asked that question, right? He's not focused on the listening side. They're focused on the creator side.
Well, they're focused on the creator side and the upcoming monetization that they're going to want everyone to opt into, who supposedly can.
But the problem is if nobody's listening, that monetization strategy is not going to work.
Right, and of course they have no bandwidth bill then. So it's like you say these kinds of things where it's only costing us a penny a customer. And I went back and I said, Angela, how much is each customer? What's the average customer cost? I can tell you it's a lot more than a penny.
Yeah, right.
Let's be real,
Yeah. So
don't for those of you listening, don't get me wrong. We get some economy of scale. When you get to a certain point, your cost per gigabit goes down. There is that.
Yeah.
But I paid that price multiple years to get there.
And many in the podcasting space, and I'm one of them as well. I like somewhat the idea of what Anchor is trying to accomplish. They're trying to take out friction out of the content creation process. They're trying to bring new people to the medium to create shows. That is certainly one of the things that he communicated. The CEO communicated up on stage, is that they're trying to bring new people to the medium and build their platform based on new podcasters, right? But yet at the same time, I also have seen them start to go after shows that are hosted on your and ours platform, right?
Right.
They've been trying to poach shows to move from our platform over to theirs, and I mean, to some degree, everybody in this medium does that kind of stuff. So it's not necessarily unusual.
I don't go poaching, though. I never go poaching.
Well, I don't even know what the word poaching means.
Poaching means, hey, Johnny, I see you're over on Rob's site. I'm going to give you some incentive here to come over and be on our site.
Oh, I think that goes on all the time.
Well, I don't do that.
Yeah. I think people are trying to build their businesses, and if they can offer something that's unique and different, then I think that's one of the things that's really, if you back up and you look at the high level view of like your platform, Libsyn, and our platform, is that we all have our unique characteristics, right? And if a podcaster likes those unique characteristics and it fits with their publishing model, then they choose based on that, right? If they're using WordPress, then you're the best solution. If Libsyn has their unique characteristics and Spreaker has theirs, so
Eileen said their average cost is 10 cents per customer. So what that really means is that
how much bandwidth is that?
So that's 1 gig. That means 1 gig. 1 gig of bandwidth on S3. So that means that there are no listeners. 1 gig? Come on. Average of 1 gig per customer?
Well, and what are they delivering the content at? Because I mean, a lot of those content creators are producing the show right in their app, right?
Yeah, I don't know, but that's, even in for this show, that would be 1 gig would be, I think our show size ends up being about 60 megs. So
on the audio side,
yeah, 10 cents.
Yeah. So I don't know what the future of Anchor is. I mean, we've seen companies like this come into the space, try and do some things, and they wind up burning out of money, or they wind up going away. We've seen it happen so many times over the years.
Yep.
I don't think you and I want to see that happen in this medium again, where there's a group of platforms that kind of burn out and disappear necessarily, because it kind of paints a dark, marker on the industry.
The only reason I'm still here, Rob, is we were slow and consistent, and we didn't.
Yeah. Well, you actually built something of value, and you got paid for that work, right?
Right.
I mean, it's the same thing with with our platform too. In Lipson, we're operating based on real revenue, right? And that's sustainable, right? We're not operating off of venture capital,
right?
And that will mean that we're going to be here in the long run,
right?
These other companies that are just starting out, they may or may not make it. I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, even look at SoundCloud. SoundCloud's managed to survive, but they don't have a strong business model, and that's always been the big thing that's limited their viability in the long run.
But he did say something interesting that I kind of caught. They're putting
Ed?
Yeah, their CEO, whatever his name was.
Yeah, the CEO.
Yeah, so he said that they're building monetization. That's the priority right now. They're building that platform out, and they are going to give podcasters the opportunity to monetize. And I'm thinking, and someone asked, is that going to be opt-in? And that was a yes. So that means they've got an economy of scale issue there too. If they don't force monetization, no one wants ads if they have a small show.
Yeah, unless they're going to make some money at it.
Right. So, and he said for the community, we hope everyone does that, of course, because it's going to take the entire community being monetized to pay for their model. So we have yet to date see a podcast hosting company survive using an advertising model alone.
Yeah.
So,
and then one of the big thing that he talked about up there too was, he got challenged around the terms of service that they have. And one of the big topics that he talked about up on stage, so we're not disclosing anything outside of what was discussed, was this concept of derivative content.
Big issue.
Which I think, which is something that really no other podcast hosting or distribution platform has really tried to do in this medium. Though that is a concept that's fairly accepted in places like social media and Facebook. So when you get these little videos that Facebook makes of your posts from the past, so they like to do this kind of like this historical montage of stuff. I believe that's what he's talking about. He's talking about taking your audio content and creating derivative works, which creates an exclusive type of relationship that you as a content provider have with that platform. And I think that's something that hasn't been done in the medium, because all of us have been respectful of the content creators and say, we're just going to be a tool for you to create your content and a place to publish it. We're not going to take your content and do something different with it or make it available to other listeners to cut up and to use in any way that they want to use. But they basically have created an environment, and I don't know, Todd, maybe this is something we should all be thinking about, right? Of helping podcasters create derivative works. Is that something that the industry needs to support, not just Anchor?
Well, I'm just going to ask the audience that are on Facebook Live or on YouTube, if I was to take and change our licensing agreement so that your content would get cut up by us,
and then we distribute it in any way that we want to.
would you be acceptable of that? That's the question. Eileen says, I think you misunderstood derivative content. If someone leaves me a message on the app, I have the right to play it in my show. No, the derivative works goes beyond that, Eileen.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly part of it. But I wouldn't call that a derivative necessarily works. I would, it's content that they auto-generate on your behalf and make available to whether it be other platforms. And so let's say you're a content creator on this platform and you want to move to, let's say, Blueberry or move to Spreaker. Can you take that derivative work that was created out of your content, the supposedly, in the terms of service, the company says that you own, right? Can you take that somewhere else, right? And that's what begs the question, do we as other platform providers in this industry need to support derivative content now? If that's the long-term goal here.
But he couldn't answer his own legal question on the derivative works, on ownership and all that other stuff. He was confused himself. And he said, well, let's get together after the show and get that answered.
Yeah.
So Greg says, if you pay, maybe. Mike says no. So 2 responses to that question.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's an interesting, I understand what and if you look at the reason that, the license is written exactly because they want to cut that content up and create derivative works. In order to do that, they have to have the licensing agreement that they currently have.
Yeah, or it could be clips. It could be they could auto-generate based on copyrighted licensed graphics. A video version of your show. Yeah. They could.
But there's
lots of things that they could do.
But if you look at like the team from Audio Burst, I love what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
You can take and have a clip, a segment. You as the content creator control that, and you create a 15-second or 30-second or 1-minute clip that they create a Facebook video for that you can post. And it's all these little tools to do some self-promotion, but yet all of it leads back to your home site. Their goal is to be able to have this type of these clips and derivative works going into Alexa and different. Sorry, I just triggered your devices. Smart home devices. So that but you're also opting in to do that with them. And it's a tool.
And I think it's not a bad idea. I don't get the wrong impression on what I'm saying here. That I think that these are bad ideas. I'm all in favor of terrific ideas in this medium. But I think where they're missing the point is that the basis of this medium is around the creator's control, right? Creator is in charge. The creator owns, and you need to be consistent in that view. When you come out and say that the owner owns the content, well, you need to live up to that promise. And what it feels like to me is that they're taking license with the ability to make things easy or to make things so simple that the content creator loses control.
And when you're on Instagram, you're on YouTube, that content doesn't drift too far out unless you allow embedding and if you allow social sharing on those sites. It stays within those ecosystems. It doesn't spread too far. YouTube maybe more than anybody because it could be embedded on a website somewhere. So that experience stays within YouTube, but you still can't cut up content on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you can't copy someone's image on Instagram and make a derivative work of it.
Correct. And he did talk about this concept of being able to use major label music in your podcast that would only be available on certain listening platforms. So let's say you're a subscriber to Spotify, right? And you're getting content from Spotify, music content. And let's say Anchor gets a license with Spotify to say, okay, for shows that are only distributed on Spotify, you can use major label music in your podcast because it's only on Spotify and Spotify is paying licensing rights, right? Mm-hmm. So this is another derivative content question, right? This is exclusive content that would be generated by Anchor and distributed to one listening platform based on a license that exists between Anchor and Spotify. And that would give you the rights to use copyrighted music.
I think that's an interesting concept.
It's an interesting idea, but it's not something, it's a completely different way of thinking about creating a podcast.
Yep.
Right. So it's a good idea.
So anyway, there was a little crowd in the back of the room, and we're listening.
There's probably 10 or 15 people there.
Yeah. That were, all listening to and let's be frank, we're looking at what they're doing. All of us are. We have to.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting move. So time will tell on where this all pans out for them.
But free hosting, all of these new ideas, which are, I think they're interesting ideas. But don't get me wrong.
But remember, nothing is for free.
Well, you are the product, right?
Well, not necessarily you are the product. Something else has to pay the bills. Something has to pay the bills. Companies don't survive without revenue. So, so what is that revenue? The revenue is monetization.
Does that revenue kind of come from? What are the typical events that happen around venture capital funded companies, right?
They shift.
They either shift their business model, right?
Right.
Or they burn out of money.
Yeah.
Or they sell to a bigger company.
Right. Oh.
Those are the only other two options that you have. You either build a real business.
And who is a major investor in Anchor, Rob?
I believe one of the major investors is Google Ventures.
Oh,
yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
we need to talk too much more about that.
The puzzles.
Let your mind wander on that one.
The puzzles start to come in place. Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, it's only speculation.
You never know. Right.
Yeah.
Eileen said, I know you were in Philly, but sitting in the back of the room remind me of the Broad Street Bullies.
Well, we were like a pack of wolves.
We were whispering back and forth. Yeah. Kind of funny. Yeah. So, yeah. But, and we honestly wanted to hear what they had to say, too, about the licensing stuff. Because, it's very unusual. And, it's the first ever like this. So, that's...
Well, I'm not sure a lot of people, a lot of people didn't go to that session. So maybe they don't have a glimpse of what the real strategy is.
Yeah, maybe we're giving them...
He laid it out.
Yeah, we're giving lots of free advertising here for them. So...
Well, we are. We are.
But we got to be honest. We want to talk about everything. So, all right. So those were probably two of the big gorillas that we talked about. It was in discussion points. Lots of wheeling and dealing going on. Lots of people. I'm telling you. I don't know, Rob. Did you everyone's looking for content. Even I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Everyone that is in the advertising space, content space. Hey, have you got content? What do you have? Like, can I get a list of your shows? And I'm just again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And of course, if you look at AdsWiz made an announcement about their partnership deals. And a disclaimer: we're doing some stuff with AdsWiz. We're part of that announcement. So was Libsyn and a few others.
We were included in that as well.
Yeah, and VoxNest is doing their thing. Podbean's doing their thing. Wide Orbit's doing their thing. The only people that weren't there was Triton. Triton was not in the house. Didn't see them.
I saw John Rosso was there.
Oh, you saw him?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I must have missed him.
Yeah.
And then a lot of small boutique folks that are having a small bevy of shows, 60, 70, 100 shows under their wings, lots of those looking to expand, looking for tech solutions. So that was kind of on the wider business side. There was some major, let me see if I can find it. There was a major company there, and you have to watch the video. There was a major company there that was talking to people too.
What are you showing us, Todd?
I'm showing you a mobile phone from a specific vendor.
Oh, like a well, why don't you mention the vendor? Can you?
Yeah, I guess there's no secret in it. Samsung was there in force.
Oh, Samsung. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they were there in force. They're talking to
Well,
people.
so was Apple. So
yeah, Apple too, of course.
They were there as well.
Yeah. So,
Google was there in force. I think they had 9 people there.
Yeah.
Spotify was there with a couple people that I know of.
Yeah, I didn't talk to any of the Spotify folks.
Yeah, I talked to Dossie and Robin were there.
There might be, and I heard a rumor, and I don't have this verified yet, but Spotify might, keyword is might, be working on a solution for self-hosters. So if that's the case, that's good news for self-hosters. But I don't have any confirmation on that. I didn't get it firsthand. I got it third party. So,
well, that would be a big issue for what you're doing, right?
Oh, it'd be fantastic. We've always said that there's a big chunk of podcasters out there that are on the sidelines. They can't get in. Yeah. And we're content creators first. So anything that Spotify can do to open that up, I think is good. Do you see any Pandora folks?
I did not.
Me neither.
But I'm sure they were probably there, would be my guess. But I didn't meet with anybody.
Yeah. What about iHeart?
Oh, iHeart was there in force. Yeah.
How many people did they have?
Minimum of, I think, 2-3 people.
Yeah, I saw Chris, I think. So, yeah, there was
Chris and Maddie, who's a new hire.
Yeah.
There to work with local affiliates on the podcasting side.
Yeah. And then, of course, how much traffic did TalkShoe, they relaunched some stuff at the show, and they've got a new owner. It's a completely different group over there.
Don't they relaunch at every podcast movement?
I don't think so, but I think they added.
I thought they did last year too.
I think they added video. So
this year they did, yeah.
That's the rumor I heard. And then TalkShoe is an interesting model. And we've had a long time relationship with them. Of course, not with the current group, but their model really was based upon that Iowa telecom exchange where you'd call in and they did the shows over the phone, and their revenue model was from the per minute revenue share that came back from that Iowa telecom. Same thing like free conference call and so forth. And that there's a small loophole there that it's a local, and there's some sort of fees they get back that makes it pretty lucrative. So TalkShoe uses some of those same exchanges, I think, for their product. Then, the Westwood guys, how much traffic were they getting to their booth? And to be honest with you, their signage was horrible. Any thoughts on the Westwood?
They were trying to recruit talent. What they're trying to do.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to see how busy their booth. Anyone see? Did they even talk to the Westwood folks? Anybody that's on the show? Did you guys talk to Westwood at all?
I did not actually spend any time with them. I just didn't.
Yeah, I didn't
hang out with them.
Yeah. So overall, though, I think the top number was 2,500 was the registered number. It felt well over 2,000.
Yeah, I think it's another number that I saw throughout was about 2,300. So I haven't gotten confirmation from Dan exactly what his counts were. I don't know if I haven't talked to him since the event, so
it definitely felt like more than 2,000. You looked at, I went into the keynote room and just that, it was wall to wall. There wasn't hardly a seat available. And then I walk out of the keynote room and there's still a massive crowd. And I'm like, yeah, there's 2,000 people here at least. So, so they did one heck of an event. Holy cow.
Yeah.
And like I said, my voice is still recovering too.
Yeah. It's coming back.
A lot of new podcasters, a lot of people. There was a good mix of folks that haven't launched a show yet.
So next year it's going to be down in Orlando in the middle of August.
When's hurricane season in Florida?
It's in the fall.
Let me look at I think it's right now, isn't it?
I think this is, it could be starting up now, yeah.
Hurricane season, Florida. What months is hurricane season, Florida? The least active month, so on a worldwide scale, May is the least active month. September is the most active. June 1 to November 30th, from late August through September is the peak. Oh, Dan, man, you guys rolled the dice there. August.
It's going to be hot and humid.
Yeah. It is, and they actually are at risk because those type of events, Mother Nature is not. They don't get most of those venues in Florida. They don't give a refund if there's a hurricane event. You still, I don't know if they buy insurance or what. So, but anyway, Orlando in August. What did they say? What the reasoning was for picking August? I mean, for picking Orlando. Was there any?
I didn't hear anything. No.
Well,
though I think that they're working their way back to Texas is my guess.
Interesting.
I think that's probably going to be their next event after that. I'm just totally guessing. I don't have any inside information, but
it was definitely a different crowd. It was East Coast centric this year. It was definitely there was so many people. I'm like, don't know anybody, and a lot of people. Here's the thing too. A lot of people that didn't know us. And that to me is like, whoa, really? You're in the podcasting space and you don't, and they didn't know who Podbean was, didn't know who Libsyn was, and just, really, it was like, wow. So
yeah, and there was some new hosting platforms that invested a lot of money in visibility at that event.
Mm-hmm.
Some brand new ones that are also venture capital based.
Yep. So it was a good event. We're crazy long, Rob. We're 2 hours and 15 minutes already.
I know. Wow.
So, hey, we told you it'd be a long one.
Yeah.
Anything else from the chat room? Have we missed anything here that we should talk about? There was so much.
Yeah.
Rob, I heard that Mike met you guys, and that I left Thursday night, flew home to see my mom. But I heard Mike had to leave the hotel at 4 a.m. or some ridiculous time.
We were still up.
And you guys met him at the elevator or something. You guys were still in the bar or something.
We were still in the bar talking till
at 4 o'clock in the morning.
No, it was like 3:30. I think
Oh my God.
Like
Did you run him out of booze?
Well, I didn't drink at all the whole event. I didn't have any drinks. But yeah, we just, Rob Walsh and I and a group of other folks, we just stayed up really late down the bar talking.
So what did I
hanging out?
What did I miss? What was the last? What did you guys? What conspiracies? What evil plans did you guys hatch in those 12 hours?
I wouldn't say that there was any evil plans hatched. It was just one of those things. It was the last night before everybody was going home, and everybody was just hanging out together. And Dave Jackson was there, and Rob and a bunch of other podcasters. So we were just hanging out, it's like going home the next day. It's not unusual for us to stay up pretty late on the last night.
Yeah.
Just hanging out with people. That's like probably the last time we're going to be able to do it for a year or so.
Yeah. I had to go see my mom for a couple of days. So I busted out, being that we weren't exhibiting on Thursday and I got done speaking. I rolled.
Yeah, it was a little weird having that whole last day completely off.
Yeah, I kind of felt lost a little bit, to be honest with you. Just kind of standing in the hallways. I'm not used to that.
Right.
Not having a base to interact with people, but that's the day you need to have like this flashing billboard. Come talk to me about podcasting or something,
Yeah. Well, I hope that Dan hears the feedback that we'd like to go at least another half day on the third day.
Yeah, I agree.
So, or 2/3 of the day or whatever, like till 2 p.m. or something. At least, because I do get a sense that a lot of people didn't make it down to the exhibition.
Oh, there was
I heard that feedback.
Well, I got feedback. The feedback I got was, you guys are done? You guys are closed up? We didn't know you guys weren't going to be here today. We're going to come see you. I heard that a number of times.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people didn't read I think they're looking at their app and maybe didn't know it was yeah. So, yeah, Dan, listening, 3 days, please.
Yeah.
That's my vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
All right. Well, we can wrap it up, I think.
Yeah. Just from a scheduling standpoint, I'm looking here at my calendar. I start travel, Rob, on the 19th, which is a Sunday, and will be 2 weeks out. But I should, so you're probably going to have to host the show on the 25th and the 1st of September.
Well, I'm going to be out of the pocket. I'm going to be at DragonCon in Atlanta. That's starting on the 29th through the 2nd.
Okay, so
I'm on 3 panels at DragonCon.
All right, so we'll plan on doing 2 more shows here. One on the 25th, then you'll host. You'll be out for the September 1st show, and then I should be good for a couple of, maybe for 5-6 weeks. Shouldn't have an issue. So, all right. Well, so anyway, we got lots to talk about. I
might be out on the 18th. No. In September,
Okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. So I'm good for the next 2 weeks. Sure.
Okay. All right. Good. All right, everybody. This is a monster show. You knew it would be. Love to hear your feedback. It's Todd at blueberry.com. Rob.
You can find me Rob at Voxnest or Rob at Spreaker.com.
And of course, I'm at Geek News on Twitter, and you're at Rob Gilly on Twitter.
Yep.
So love to hear your feedback on this one. This was lots of content. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with your fellow podcasters. We want more podcasters listening to this show. And if you have an idea for a guest we should have on, please let us know. We respect all our guests we bring on, and I'd love to hear their.
I'm looking at, just to let everybody know, I'm trying to get Spotify on the show, and
great.
Then the other one I'm going to invite back over is Mr. Rob Walsh, so we can get him back on the show and get his assessment of what happened at Podcast Movement too. I don't know if we can get him on next week or.
Yeah, but that'd be good. Next week would be good.
Yeah.
But Spotify should be a hot one.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Yep.
We'll see you next time here on the New Media Show. That's how you search for it in Google now. New Media Show.
New Media Show. Drop the.
Yeah, it's gone. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Aloha. Bye-bye.